We're here with Anna Winoto, Lena Kolyada, Esther McIntosh and Jacqui de Lacy. I'm not going to introduce them. Their bios are underneath the chat box here. We're going to jump straight into the conversation. So if it's okay, I'll hand it over to you women. Can you tell us about your career path? All of you are senior leaders in international development. We'd love to hear a little bit about how you reached your leadership position. Maybe Anna, if you could kick us off.
Hi, good evening to most of you and good morning to us over here in Asia. I'm Anna Winoto. I'm the team leader of KOMPAK. KOMPAK is a governance program that's managed by Abt Associates and funded by the Australian government, looking into how to improve health, education, legal identity for poor and vulnerable Indonesians. So the team leadership role that I have now is probably the most significant leadership role that I've ever had. Previously, I've been mostly in technical roles in UNICEF for 12 years. And then I was also an advisor embedded in government. And then previous to the team leader role, I was the program delivery director at KOMPAK. So I've seen KOMPAK through its phases and risen to the top of KOMPAK. But I would say that the current role is perhaps reflects a pretty big shift for me from that traditionally technical role to a pretty huge leadership role. I'm overseeing 150 staff in 7 offices spread across Indonesia. And I think it also reflects a different type of legitimacy and authority. I think previously in a technical role, I was able to basically bank on my technical competencies mostly, but now as a team leader, I had to gain legitimacy and trust from the whole of team and also from the stakeholders, namely the government of Indonesia and also the DFAT, Australia DFAT. So that's a little blip about me. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Anna. Maybe Esther, would you let us know about your career and how you got to where you are? Esther's in PNG and we've had some issues with the tech, but we can hear her really well. Over to you, Esther.
Thanks, Lisa, and good morning, everyone. I think reflecting on my career, it began with a bit of a speed bump. I wanted, after I finished my master's, to work in the public sector and to work in government, and that's what I saw myself doing, being a part of a very vibrant public sector reform process. And that didn't work out. I spent about 6 months unemployed. And then eventually I got a job where I didn't expect to find one in an INGO, working at the subnational level, which is something 18 years on that has sort of defined my view of development and has remained a key focus in my career. So I started off at, working at the community level on the borders with Brazil. I'm from Guyana. And I then sort of started out in sort of program officer. I started as a facilitator and I worked my way up over the years working in my own country. And then 4 years into that, I branched off and started working internationally, firstly as a UN volunteer, and then moving on into various managerial positions. A couple of years in, I went back home and started a consulting firm focusing on research. So that, I think, definitely helped to catapult me a little bit because it opens your skill set both to, think of yourself as a brand, to be able to, work in a very sort of competitive and difficult work environment. So after a few years, the firm I started is now 12 years old and going strong. But I sort of branched out. I wanted to work more internationally again. So I then became country director working with a great organization in Sri Lanka called World University Service of Canada. And that also led me to my current role as the director of the Decentralization Partnership. Like Anna, I would say that, the complexity and size and scope of my work has continued to grow over time. So this is, the sort of latest and a very exciting sort of leadership role for me. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Esther and Anna. Sorry, everyone, I'm muting. I have a dog in the background. Welcome to Working at Home. One thing that I would like thanks very much for laughing, Esther. Those of you who are participating, if you wouldn't mind in the chat, just letting us know, we want to know what level you're at in your careers, where you are. just so that we can have an idea of a feel about how the audience is experiencing their careers at the moment. And then I'm going to hand over to Lena to give us the story of her career and to point out some of those important milestones in the way that Anna and Esther did.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you everybody for the opportunity, and good morning and good evening. My name is Leonor Kolada, and I'm currently Abt Associates Chief of Party in Ghana, one of the 25 country programs under PMI Vector Link project, which is dealing with vector control issues, mostly in Africa, but we have a couple of countries outside of the continent. So my story started actually when I was categorized as youth. I really wanted to travel, but travel with a useful purpose around the world. And I'm originally from Kazakhstan. It's a republic in the Soviet Union. So I was youth at that time. So I started looking for opportunities, started picking up on English language classes, and I started my career with Abt Associates when they had a project in Kazakhstan. It was a regional program on health systems, and through the friend of a friend, I started working there. So, and that was the beginning of my journey, which took me through the Kazakhstan, few years in Kazakhstan, and then I moved to the US. And in Kazakhstan, we were already developing a very nice social marketing programs and behavior change activities on public health issues. So it was very exciting and moving upstream the career for me. So when I moved to the US, I continued with Abt Associates. I have to admit, Abt Associates is the only big employer of my life. So I'm one of the loyal people who managed to grow within the company, which is, I think it's a great, great example, to be honest, for all the younger people who inspire. So when I moved to the States, my career had to be sliding back a little bit because of change of the culture and absolutely different work environment, which I was not very well prepared. So I had to catch up quickly, and for that, I had to start basically from zero. At the age when young professionals in the US were already like running full speed, I was kind of just starting at starting point. So the main issues actually were the language, of course. I did not speak fluent. I don't speak fluent even now, but before it was very, very challenging for me. So I remember that. And another point, I remember I had to learn how to self-market yourself and how to promote your best qualities and how to demonstrate and keep talking about yourself in superlative words to kind of get on the agenda of the managers and supervisors. So anyway, it took a couple of years, and I started taking on different projects and working on my social marketing and behavior change communication experience and expertise. And then trying to find kind of my own tribe and look for larger projects to work on. And for the last 10 years, I've been working with this vector control program, which gradually took me to the COP position. And now I'm on my third year in the COP role in Ghana, managing the program. So I think I can stop here for now. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Lena. That's quite a career and great story. I just wanted to let you all know that we've got in the audience, we've got Chief of Party, we've got a couple of them. We've got a second-time CEO, Managing Director of Operations. We've got a few people who are at mid-level and looking to move into the executive level of their career, and a gender officer in a program financed by USAID. Hi to everyone. It's good to see you. We're just seeing you in the chat because we can't see your faces. So it's really great to hear from you in the chat. We've got a deputy program manager as well. So we've got quite a few mid to senior level professionals there who are working their way up to potentially our next speaker, Jacqui de Lacy, who's the managing director of Abt. Jacqui, could you tell us a little bit about your career steps and what you think is really important in looking for team leaders and chiefs of party when it comes to your position as managing director?
Yeah, thanks very much, Lisa. I'll probably take that in 2 bites. So just a little bit about me, and then we can talk about what we look for when we're looking for team leaders, particularly for those of you, or chiefs of party, as the US call them, for those of you that are looking to sort of move yourself up in the career ladder. So I've worked in international development my whole professional life, and I'm now in my 50s, so that's quite a while, so about 30 years. I spent the first big chunk of my life working in government. I joined the Australian Overseas Aid Program as a graduate economist, and then spent 20 years working within government in a whole range of roles, but quite a lot of overseas placements, including in Indonesia, where I got to meet Anna. I've also spent a lot of my life working on the Pacific and Papua New Guinea in particular. I have a particular passion for Papua New Guinea because I was born in the highlands of Papua New Guinea and spent the first 10 years of my life living there, which is, I think, why I wanted to do development. When I worked in government, I think I just steadily moved up the career path in government. I had some fantastic mentors. I think I was lucky that for a lot of my early career, I had a partner who was willing to go with me wherever the job opportunities took me, and he was just prepared to follow me around the world, which was really amazing, and I think that was incredible. When I started having children, I probably had about 10 years of my career where I was really prioritizing having babies, working part-time, trying to get pregnant with another child. And so what I would say is I spent sort of maybe 10 years, 12 years really progressing up the career ladder, going wherever the interesting jobs took me. And then I spent 10 years trying to work part-time and taking time off to focus on being a mother. And one of my lessons that I would like to share with you all is we can't all progress all of our careers. I think there are times in your life where that's going to make sense, that it suits your whole of life for you to be pursuing more responsibility and more diversity in your career experiences. But there are other times where that is not going to be your highest priority. And my great lesson to myself is I wish I hadn't worried about that so much. There are going to be times where work isn't that critical, and you should just understand we're going to be working for a long time in our careers. So don't feel like that journey up the ladder has to occur all of the time. I did leave government after 20 years. I had been heading Australia's aid program to Indonesia. It was a really big program. I had about 150 staff and a budget of about 700 million Australian dollars a year. It was the biggest overseas aid program we had. But my husband wanted to go back to full-time work. My children, I was going to transition back into schooling in Australia. And I just decided I didn't want to work full-time for a while. I was too senior in government to take a part-time job. So I had to make the decision to leave government. And I joined Abt Associates, which was just the most fantastic place to land. It had the right values for me. I had this most amazing boss, Jane Thomason, who offered me incredibly flexible work. And I worked from home for a couple of years until we were able to build the Canberra office. I then took over all of the international development practice in the Abt Australia business. And when Jane left 2.5 years ago, I took over as managing director of Abt Australia. And then about a year ago, I got another promotion within Abt. So I now manage all of the Australian business as well as our UK business. And I sit on the executive leadership team of Abt Associates, which is a very large global development firm. So I've had an incredibly lucky career. I think what's been key to it is I'm really passionate about my work. I love it. And I think that really makes a difference. I've sought very diverse types of work within the organisations. I haven't sort of just tried to fit in one box. So I've got lots of different experiences behind me. But probably the single most important thing is I've had fantastic mentors, just wonderful people who've supported me and helped me progress at every stage of my career. So another key learning for me is really work on your relationships with people around you, people that you respect. And I think all of us have an obligation. I mean, we all benefit from those mentoring networks. And I think if we can then become mentors ourselves and give back, that's a really great thing for all of us to do. I think you learn as much from the people you mentor as the people who mentored you. So I'd really encourage all of you to be part of those informal networks that really have made a big difference to my career. So in Abt Associates, so I manage the Australia and the UK parts of Abt Associates, which is a global firm. And we have a really strong commitment at Abt for equity, and in particular gender equity. And that is at all levels of our organisation, including our chiefs of party and team leaders. So we've taken a very deliberate decision that we want to have as many female chiefs of party and team leaders as there are male ones. So we have actively sought and looked for talent to reflect the diversity of the communities we work with, right? Which I think is really important in our business. And we all know diversity will make us a stronger organisation. But you have to actively look for female leadership, because a lot of the existing leaders, chiefs of party and team leaders, are male. So if you've made a decision that you want more representation of women in those roles, you have to hire more for potential than actual experience. When you're trying to shift the dynamic between a field that is largely male-based to one that is more representative and inclusive of women, you have to be looking for talent, not just people who've done that job before, but the people who have done work of a similar nature and have the potential to fill that role. So I think committing to hiring for potential rather than the actual experience of doing the equivalent job is really critical if you want diversity, if you want to change the mix of skills. And it's very obvious, but it's not something we talk about enough. So I think the first thing is you've got to commit to really looking for diverse talent and hiring more for potential. And when I think about what we're looking for in our chiefs of party and team leaders, I think there's three things that really matter. So the first is, when you're a chief of party or a team leader, you are usually managing a really diverse and complex team of individuals who are often come from very different backgrounds, who are often actually geographically dispersed. I mean, I work closely with both Anna and Esther, and both of them manage teams that are geographically dispersed across Papua New Guinea in Esther's case, or across Indonesia in Anna's case. So having a leader that's able to build the skills and capabilities and have everyone working together and pulling together, having established a workplace culture and work ethic, a clarity of purpose, to make people feel happy and connected and willing to support each other as a team is really, I think, the single most important attribute of being a team leader. So it's that ability to mobilise the best results from your team of people and keep people working together and happy, I think is a really critical skill. The other, I mentioned that there were three skills. So that's the first and I think the most important. The second is we work in international development. We work on really hard, complex development problems. So having people who have invested their time into understanding the strategic complexity of getting results in development is really important, because we're only there to get the results that transform people's lives. So I think to be a really good team leader, you do need to have technical strengths in development. You need to be able to set the strategic direction of the program so that it gets the sort of results that transforms people's lives. So I think there's a really big people leadership component, but there's a technical leadership component. And it's not just about what we're doing today, but it's about how today adds up to results that we can achieve over the life of the program, and how in the long run that intersects and how that works with other partners in country. The third skill I think that's really critical is stakeholder management or influencing skills. Again, in development, it's not just what we never do work by ourselves, right? So we're always working with civil society partners, with government partners. We have to work with the clients who pay our money. We have to work with the communities who we're trying to support improvements in their lives. So all of our work is about influencing these other organisations in order to be able to achieve better results. So the third category of skills we really look for are people who are able to engage and work effectively with really with outside partners, and are able to sort of build trust, understand where those partners are at and work with them where they're at, and find ways to influence them. So it's those three skills: the people leadership box, the strategic development skills as well as the influencing and stakeholder management skills that I think are most critical.
Thanks, Jacqui. You've given us a lot to think about there. We also put in the chat a question about mentoring, which seems to be something that a few of you have brought up, and I'd love to hear from the audience about that. Esther, Anna, and Lena, do you have any additional key characteristics that you're looking for in your teams when you think about leadership? Is there something you wanted to add to Jacqui's list of 3, which is an excellent list?
Maybe I'll add just a bit. I also look for that thirst to grow. I think when I see, it connects a bit with what Jacqui mentioned earlier about hiring for potential rather than for the experience, because there are some young staff that I have that definitely have more potential than what's written in their TOR. So I give that, I try to give the benefit of the doubt and look for that motivation to grow into something bigger, to a bigger role within the organization. So I also look for that.
I can add that I'm also appreciating when people demonstrate proactively their skills and interests. So you don't have to go to them, but they come to you to generate an idea, to share an idea, or to kind of any progress, any discussion. So that's really one of the key features for me as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and perhaps I would add, and I think it's linked to what Jacqui said. I mean, I think that one thing that always sort of resonates with me is when, you know, persons are able to, you know, demonstrate a passion and commitment for the change and the overall outcomes that we're working for as a team. Because I think for me, ultimately, especially in a country like Papua New Guinea, you really need to find people who are, you know, have shared values in terms of, you know, what it is that we are trying to change here, because I think that also influences, you know, the commitment, the willingness to be flexible and, you know, understand the importance of working as a team, going beyond and with building a capacity and so on of other team members. So I think that is something that's is really critical and in a way very infectious, you know, especially in our case where we often interview, especially in the area of women, women who probably had not had the same opportunities as men. So they typically would come in with lesser academic qualifications, but usually that's with a strong background and commitment to a particular area that we're working in.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point you make at the end there, Esther, is that the structures of recruitment around leadership are really geared towards a gentleman who has a family at home, Absolutely. Looking after everything for them. And so they've been able to dedicate themselves to their career, to their education, doors have opened for them. And then we expect that same standard from potentially the women we want to bring up in leadership who may not have had those similar opportunities. So it's a really, yeah, it's an excellent point. Thanks for sharing that. We had a couple of comments from the audience here. One about from Janelle saying she loved this idea of hiring for potential. That was one of she's saying she's one of those people who was hired for her potential, which she really appreciates. And then a few comments about mentorship, saying that it's pushed people to take a chance, especially as a woman who tend to be more risk adverse. Yep, I hear you, sister. And want to be super qualified before they apply. I think that's one of the big things we hear a lot. Is that true, that women will hold themselves back a bit because they think, oh, I'm not quite right for this, I'm just not sure. Do any of you have any experience of that in your careers or that you've seen as leaders?
I mean,
well, if I could perhaps quickly, sorry, go ahead, Anna. Oh, I was just going to say quickly that, I mean, one thing that I always share with women on my team or women who are colleagues and friends is I think careers are quite unique things. They're as unique as you are. And it's really important not to start with, you know, what it is that you don't have. I don't think there's any blueprint for, you know, this is the way that you get to a leadership level. I think it's really about celebrating what's unique and different about you and embracing that. And I think that's a really important message for many women. women, especially because confidence is definitely something that, tends to be a roadblock. Jacqui?
Yeah, look, Esther, I absolutely agree with you. I think I had this moment in my career, maybe to make it a bit more personal. I was getting promoted quite regularly, and then I wanted to have children, and I took a pause on my career. And I remember the CEO of my department, the head of my department, saying to me, Jacqui, you have to put in for the next level up. And I'm going, I'm not ready. I've got a baby, I've got a toddler, it's complex. And he said to me, if you're not at this particular level by the time you're 40, you might as well give up. And I remember, and he was going to back me to get promoted, even though I had young children, but I wasn't ready to do that role. I wasn't emotionally or intellectually ready to do that role. My mind was in a very different space. And I agonized about it for a while, but decided not to apply. But what I learned, and I did get a level up when I was ready to apply for it. But what I realized is that was a particular male career path, that where you didn't have to pause your career to prioritize your family. So it's to Esther's point that I think people's career paths are very individual, and why you need a few mentors is that they can help you come to terms with that there isn't just one career path. It's got to be the career path that works for you. So there are times where I've seen women, and myself included, being reluctant to apply for jobs because they feel they're not ready. And that's where they need people around them to support and encourage them and ask them to apply. And Anna, I think, when you became Chief of Party for the KOMPAK program, we really encouraged you to apply for that role. And I think there is an obligation on all of us to identify good talent, whether it's women or men, and encourage them to apply for the roles, whether they're within your organisation or without. That is a great gift. But there are also going to be times where women choose not to go for promotion for a whole range of other reasons. And I think we should respect that as well.
Yeah, excellent point, Jacqui. Anna or Lena, did you want to add anything else to that part of the conversation?
No, I guess I can add that I extremely agree both with Esther and Jacqui that you need to have someone to push you, to make you brave and stronger, just supporting you to make these decisions when you're at the critical point, exactly, and you're not sure about yourself, so you cannot overcome this indecisiveness on your own. You definitely need to have either excellent mentor, supervisor, or friend, or some kind of even role model who can serve you that purpose. So I absolutely agree. You shouldn't try to do it on your own, especially when you're hesitating. So you always need a hand. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Lena. And I know that women, we're very we work a lot on our own, like we're very self-sufficient.
Exactly.
We have many things to do. It can be difficult to ask for help. Yeah, it can be difficult to reach out.
And we're creating it for ourselves, so we kind of look in it. So we should be trying to look outwards and try to be open and seek this support. Just asking around. That's my thing.
Yeah,
One of the things we've done, Leisa, to get really talented women to apply for Chiefs of Party for us is I've given them references of people like Anna. So I've said, because there are women who think they could be really good, but they're balancing their family lives. And am I really ready for a Chief of Party role? And isn't this going to be too hard as a working mother or as someone who has caring responsibilities for their elderly parents? And what I've done is given them names of other women who are in leadership roles within our company and talk to them about how they're balancing it and the sort of support networks, the support that they need to do it, and then making sure we can line that up in advance. But I think sometimes women do need a lot more encouragement because they are dealing with really complex whole of life balances in making these choices, and good employers should recognise that and support them to be able to do those roles.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent point. Anna, did you have a response to that?
Yeah, I just benefited from all that nudging that Jacqui and Jane Thomason, whom Jacqui referred to earlier. It was exactly like that. I mean, when the position was advertised, basically my boss, she decided to leave the project for another project that she's interested in. And I remember the conversations with my husband. He said, if she doesn't want the job, why do you want it? and I knew that inside I really wanted to do this, and I knew that I can do it. But I had some doubts, like, oh, how am I going to deal with all the politics with the stakeholder management? I've seen what it can do to people. It can be quite draining. And how do I, how do I mobilize all these people to be, together with me and deliver results together? There were a lot of self-doubt moments, but at those times, I chatted with Jacqui and Jane, and they were the ones who really, kind of emphasized what the haves that I have, and not worrying about the gaps that I'm worried about. And they helped me to grow into the role, and now I'm quite comfortable, and I really love my job. Yeah.
It's a great story. So one of the questions, or a couple of questions from the chat now, are asking about this idea of mentorship. And there's two, I think, that if you could all respond to, it'd be interesting to hear. One is about, panelists speak about mentorship. Do they actually mean sponsorship? Research shows that women are over-mentored and that we need as people who are going to advocate for us, just as you were talking about, Anna, when we're not in the room, to get key breakthrough promotions. That's kind of one. So this idea of sponsorship and a more kind of active role for mentors. And then another one was, how do you find these people or mentors that will push you? The experience of this person is that people in a position to do that are very busy and not really all that interested. So any responses from any of you on those two issues?
I think mentorship isn't like, it's not, sometimes it just takes a quick phone call. It's not like you have to be dedicated to that person. I try to do this also with my younger staff. There are a lot of young talented staff with potential, but like me, they were going through, okay, you've given me a bigger task, Anna. Can I really do this? But it just takes check-in points. Hey, how are you doing? Reaching out and taking that bit of time, 10 to 15 minutes for a call every now and then. How are you doing? And then sometimes they would say, tell a story about, oh, this is what happened the other day. What do you think? What can we reflect on this together? Can we do it differently? I do that because that's what I do with Jane. When I'm having issues, I'll call her up, and when I don't say anything, she will call me. Hey, how are you doing? So it takes that, it's a two-way relationship of reaching out. Yeah, and I'm not sure if I actively sought to find a mentor, but I just kind of knew the people that I look up to, like Jacqui, Jane. I also have other mentors in government that I rely on for advice and yeah, feedback, basically.
So Lisa, on the sponsorship, it's a good point. So certainly someone, when you sit in an organisational structure where you have influence and authority, I think you can do both. You can be both a sponsor and a mentor. And certainly my career has been aided by people who have advocated for me within the organisation. So I think sponsorship is something we should acknowledge and talk about, and it should be actively sought after. And particularly if you work in an organisation that's committed to diversity, then sponsorship really matters, because if you've got to be looking for talent to, that represents the diversity that you want in your leadership group. So I really acknowledge that, and I'm glad it was brought up. But I do think mentorship is also really important. And many of my mentors I haven't worked with now, or quite a few of them I haven't worked with them for 10, 15, 20 years, but they're still people I will go to when I've got a really difficult, nutty issue, either personal or professional, to work through. I'll still call them up. And now it might only be every 6 months, but I'll still do it. And then catching up for a coffee if we're ever in the same city. So it's more those personal connections, but people that you trust to be able to put really difficult issues and you get some advice. my other thing is I think it's good to have a few different people to test ideas with, because there's never ever one answer. And what you want to do is test it with a few different people, and then that can help you settle on how you decide to go forward on a difficult issue.
Another question that came up was someone appreciated the very specific traits that you, Jacqui, and others had mentioned about looking for team leaders and looking for leadership. She's asking, what advice do you have for women who have potential in self-promoting that potential? So she's saying, literally, what would you say to promote your potential to a more senior person in a leadership position? Does anyone have any advice on that one?
I mean, I'm happy to jump in, but I don't want to dominate. But maybe others. Lena, I think, made a really good point earlier about you have to be your own advocate. It's not. A lot of women don't feel like. A lot of women are much more cautious about promoting what they're strong in. I think we're less confident about marketing ourselves than men, and I think you have to be able to market yourself. You have to be your own advocate, and you need to practice. You really need to be authentic. Like, this isn't about pretending to be someone you're not. But the one great thing about getting older is you get more confident in what you know and what you don't know, and you have a lot less anxiety about what you don't know, because you can surround yourself with really good people who might have those skills. But I do think you need to have worked out really authentically and test with people you know what you are good at, and then find the examples and hone that pitch. There is no other substitute for it. You've got to be able to write it, you've got to be able to speak it, and you've got to be able to really draw from the experiences that you have, real life examples. You can't go into an interview. One of the things when I'm interviewing people is a lot of people have really good theory about how to do something, and what I'm really looking for is someone who can talk to a real example. And I love it when people can talk to what they learned from positive experiences, but also negative experiences. And I think that ability to do reflective learning through your own lived experience is incredibly important as you articulate what your strengths are. So spending some time thinking about what you're particularly good at and what your experiences have been that have given you those skills. But you don't have to have been a team leader before to apply for a team leader job, but you have to have led a team. I don't think you can jump into a team leader job if you haven't had any people management experience. So it's finding the similar types of things rather than the actual, same job in the past.
That's exactly also my point I want to add. I was listening to early sessions this morning, and that's what people are saying. There was a CLP session and someone asked question that all the job descriptions coming with experience request for 10, 15 years of managerial experience. And how do you get there if you don't have that? Exactly, so you don't have to have it, but you should start looking for experience of doing this on the smaller scale, the same tasks like people management, but one person management or something like that, just to build up the same experience that you can apply on a larger scale when the time comes. And that's, you have to demonstrate to your manager, supervisor, whoever is your support in the company who can help you. So that's exactly, Jacqui, I agree with you that you don't have to be this expert to start to do the job.
Yeah.
Maybe if I can add a bit also to what Jacqui and Lena just mentioned. The leadership and management experience doesn't need to come from your formal roles, right? I think when I was applying for the team leadership position, I had managed teams of 20, 25 people, but nothing of this huge size, right? But I had managed multi-sector collaboration between different institutions in government. I had been responsible for bringing together multidisciplinary teams when I was an advisor in government. So you have to identify and highlight those roles, which may not come through in your CV quite clearly, but in the interview, but also in your in the conversations you have with a potential employer, what are some of the things that are not coming through in your CV that demonstrate that you do have leadership and management skills. It could also come from your outside experience, your organizational experience. I think it's really important to highlight those as well, not just the more formal roles that are described in your titles and your positions on your CV.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah,
Esther,
and if I could add to
go
that,
ahead, Esther.
I was just going to quickly say, just to add to Anna's point, that I think as well for me, and my experience was that, you know, about the midpoint in my career, I also started to sit on boards, and that was something that I was really passionate about. And I think when you're talking about sort of strategic leadership and being able to explain the skill sets that you bring, that it's not only about what you're doing in your job, because I often draw on experiences that I have in a voluntary capacity as a board member or a board director or sitting on a committee, because I think that also, you know, builds capacity, but I think it also shows a little bit about your own dynamism and your capacity in terms of what you know, the skills that you bring in that may not only be professional.
So Esther, following up on that, one of our very popular questions at the minute from the audience is about your career and the skills that you had that were transferable to the global development sector. The question is, what were those skills that you found transferable to global development, and which one of those surprised you the most?
Sorry, what's the last part? Which one surprised me?
Yeah, which of those skills surprised you the most in those transferable skills that brought you into international development?
Well, I think, yeah, so, you know, when I made the transfer, so I've worked now in a range of countries across the world. And in my case, it started off, my first assignment working internationally was really focused on, I guess, packaging what I had been doing and aligning it with what the requirement was. So in this case, I had done, and I didn't necessarily, I guess you always have to analyze and think about your CV and then look at it in relation to what's required. So I had been doing a lot of work in capacity and organizational development, working at a rural level, working in very complex rural contexts. And I think that at the time, you know, there was a lot of discussion about like low income country development and so on. So I really started to use those skills within the interview as well to be able to make a connection and understand where those skills were, where the context of the countries that I was working in was comparable. But I would say in terms of what surprised me, I think it was probably leadership, because I never went into development wanting to necessarily work in a leadership role. I wanted to work more in a technical role, but I kept getting nudged, as you know, Jacqui and everyone saying, people saying, well, why don't you take this on and why don't you do this? And you know, as the scale of that increases, I think you learn a lot about yourself, and you yeah, and I think that's something that's perhaps a bit surprising, because if you would have said to me, you know, that I would be in Papua New Guinea working as part of a $400 million facility, I probably would have said, you know, are you kidding? But you know, over time, and I guess that's that sort of, you know, sort of slow development. I think the other thing as well is that within my career, when I became country director, for example, I was the most atypical country director ever. And I guess the point I want to make there is that, you know, I think you can also see yourself as a disruptor. You don't necessarily have to, you know, go the same path as everyone else. But all of the previous country directors, without fail, were, you know, sort of Canadian white men. And that was a big change for them, and in a way, a big gamble for them to hire someone who was from a developing country. But it worked out well. And I think it also helped to clear a path for others and to, you know, encourage an international organization that didn't previously look at a national staff pool as having potential to be in a leadership role to do so. And I think that's a key shift that's happening that we also have to embrace and encourage within the international development community.
I think that's an excellent point. I think there's definitely a shift. It feels like there's finally a shift in recognizing that national talent is as valuable as that international talent that we tend to ship in from countries like Australia, unfortunately, but other countries as well. It's a really great point. Thank you, Esther. Can I ask, this is going to get real now for a minute, women. We've got a question on there. Can anyone on the panel talk about how they may have had a tough female boss and share how they made sure not to be that type of boss, especially to junior female staff who are breaking into the leadership cycle? Not all women leaders are supportive of other women, and I'm also not all men leaders are very supportive of women making their way up through the ranks. So if any of you would like to comment on that.
Maybe I'll go first. Bit hard for Anna and Esther, given I'm their boss, but everyone should.
Here we go. This is going to get real, everybody. Here we go.
No, but I mean, I have had great bosses and terrible bosses and everything in between. After 30 years, you're bound to have a diverse experience, and I've had great female bosses and some terrible female bosses, but also the same of men. Look, I don't think it's gendered, right? You get good bosses and bad bosses, and they can be women or men. And you shouldn't assume just because it's a woman, she'll be supportive of other women in the institution. It's a shame, but it is the real world. I actually think, I mean, one thing I would say that I have always done in my career, and I think it's been probably the most important thing that's helped me, is I am someone who is always trying to learn. So, you know, I look at people around, I spend a lot of time trying to observe people around me and learn from them, learn what's good, but learn what's bad. And I think if you are the sort of person who can analyze how your boss is going and what attributes about them that you would like to replicate and what attributes about them you would definitely not like to replicate, you will over time become better and better at what you do. So while you exist as an employee, I think if you can sort of step outside the reacting space and be a bit more analytical about it, you can leave that experience with a much richer idea of how to take your leadership forward than you did before. And I think that skill is an incredibly useful skill to take forward in a whole range of domains. But look, for every boss, I think that what you've got to work out is what do they need from you and what is their style. Some bosses are very, you know, want to have a long discussion, want personal relationships. Some are really time poor and just need, you know, really quick, accurate answers. And some you're never going to develop a personal relationship with, and you should just understand that and just try and be as efficient as possible. So, you know, try and do well with the boss you have by understanding what they need from you. Some bosses are so bad, and I've had this experience that in the end I decided to walk away. That, you know, I've worked for a monster boss who I just decided it was unsafe, emotionally and intellectually to keep working for them. And in that case, if you can't change the situation and you're not prepared to continue it, then you need to leave. But again, that's within your power to do as well. But my main message is learn from each of them. You don't have to be the person they are. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Esther, Anna and Lena, with, you know, cone of silence over here amongst this group, if you wanted to share. Jacqui, could you just turn your sound off for a second? Go.
Jacqui, for the record, is a great boss.
Let's go Esther and then Lena. Is that okay?
No, I was just going to, completely agree. I think it's great the way that that Jacqui has framed it. That it's not necessarily gendered. I too, like Jacqui, had an experience as well where I didn't have a supportive boss, and I made the decision to leave. And I guess that you have to take from that experience what you need to and use that to make you stronger. But I think it also is very reflective of, that sort of the stereotypical how people often understand leaders and what a leader looks like and what a leader behaves like. In my experience, especially if you have people who were previously, for example, talking about my own country experience, had worked in the public sector where we're used to a very hierarchical structure, they tend to, sort of mirror that behavior in organizations that may be more horizontal, but they can't sort of break away from those traditional roles. But I think, and so again, in agreement with Jacqui, I think that it is an opportunity for you to reflect on your own leadership style, and to make sure that you mirror a lot of those behaviors that you think are quite important, and that may not be necessarily the way that you see other leaders behaving around you. I think it's really important and maybe that also comes with age, to be true to who you are, and to be someone that you would like to have had as a leader when you were in that position of in your employment.
Yeah, Esther took my words as well. So such experience makes you stronger, definitely. So not a supportive boss makes you develop different kind of, makes you develop further and analyze more. And I agree, you just need to look for opportunity to change that situation. So you don't have to suffer. You just need to look for better for yourself and find a different supervisor, a different job.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point, because there are great bosses out there and there are not so great.
Absolutely.
Men and women. And it is though very hard when you're in the middle of it, isn't it? Like if you're in the middle of it and you're working with a boss,
you cannot see it, right?
Yeah, no, it can be really difficult. Well, listen, I think we may have come to the end. Any last comments from the four of you? One really big thing you want us all to take away from this session? Can I hand it over to you all to tell us your last takeaway?
I can just add quickly, another point, you have to be culturally sensitive, very much so, especially in our world, since we work all over the world. And I see there was a comment earlier for me asking how I was accepted as an American in a different culture, in Ghanaian culture. And as it was easy, it wasn't that bad actually. So people are very nice in Ghana and people are very friendly. And of course, in the beginning, it was tough because I was coming with a different speed, absolutely not really aware of certain cultural aspects and behaviors and traditions, which took me a few months to learn, and it wasn't easy. But when you realize that, when you slow down a little bit and immerse, I think things definitely get better and people are really, really friendly and welcoming. So that's helpful. Yes.
Thank you, Lena. Excellent point. Esther, Anna, Jacqui, any last thoughts?
Maybe I think being a woman leader, you can expect going through a lot of hills, uphill battles. I think I've certainly experienced that, and I'm sure most of you, including the audience, will or are experiencing that as well. But I think what's important is that to realize that you're not alone. You have mentors, you have colleagues, you have family, and I think it's important to reflect on that and draw on the support you need. And asking for help is not a sign of weakness. This is something that I learned myself. It's actually a strength. So I think we need to support each other so we can get through this leadership journey together and further. Thank you.
If I could perhaps add to Anna, I think that, any discussion about leadership and about, career progression is happening at an unprecedented and a very uncertain time. So I would say that, some of the advice that was shared to me when I was starting off in my career is to always value, no matter where you are in your career, what you bring, and really honor that. And I would say as well that it's a lot of those, networks, it's a lot of your, experience and confidence that will help you to be resilient at this time. but it's extremely rewarding, and it's worth really sort of analyzing and pushing forward in terms of your own development, understanding the market, understanding what's changed, and how perhaps you need to rebrand and remarket yourself, in this sort of new dispensation of a post-COVID context.
My final take, I agree with everything the other panelists have said. My final take is leaders are humans too, and you have to look after yourself. So you're not going to be a good leader unless you're healthy, you get enough sleep, you've got strong family or friendships outside of work. So while leadership is and our work and our careers really matter, I think you need to have a sense of self and be a healthy, balanced person if you're going to be a really good leader in the long run. So never lose that commitment to looking after yourself as you go on this journey.
Anna, Lena, Esther and Jacqui, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. It's so great sitting and talking with wise women in a way like this. We really appreciate it. All of you in the audience, thank you so much for coming along.